Rosso Fiorentino paints. He is an Italian Mannerist painter, so reference our discussions of Mannerism. Also, sculptor Primaticcio. We combine here. Francis I combines sculpture and painting in one unified grouping here. So Rosso Fiorentino's painting typical Mannerist devices like shoving all the figures up to the foreground, the picture plane, like in a store window. Some fairly bright color, also taking license with the proportions of the figure. Overall, a very ornate combination of sculpture and painting at Fontainebleau. Also, these hunting lodges, uh, sort of fantasy-like castle, although they're not really castles because of the windows. But Chateau de Chambord, these are outside of Paris, not so far, around, say, the town of Blois, Blois, where many chateaux were built. Francis IV commissions this. Remember that below the cornice, below the balustrade, which separates the roof line from the two stories of the building, you see the influence of the Italian um, palazzo facades, as well as the turrets of a castle, kind of combined there. But the influence from Italy, the two stories, and the regular symmetrical classical facade there. But above the roof line, all bets are off, and it becomes just a complete Gothic fantasy. Asymmetrical, you'll notice it is not erased symmetrically. This ragged profile of the roof, typical of French Gothic, so it's combining the two. In the square court of the Louvre, Pierre Lescot and Jean Goujon Lescot, the architect, they're reinterpreting Italian palazzo facades, but the addition of the pavilion, that is, this projecting out section, this vertical projecting out section is typically French, called a pavilion. Typically French are the large, very large windows and the ornate use of Goujon's relief sculpture, that is very French. And the double columns which enframe these sculptural niches, all that is French variations, as well as this steep roof, which is not Italian. So they're merging Italian palazzo architecture of the High Renaissance, like we've talked about, with this French sensibility of the use of these pavilions, double columns framing the sculptural niches, and its ornate use of relief sculpture. Also, the large windows are very, very French. Jean Goujon's relief sculpture, sort of mirroring one another. Also, the drapery, form following drapery, in the spirit of the pediment goddesses of the east pediment of the Parthenon. Mabuse, Mabuse paints, it's after Durer actually. It's his attempt to incorporate the Italian perspective, proportion in the human figure in this architectural setting. Quentin Massus, a moneylender, and his wife from 1514. We see the northern concern with still life and the depiction of many, many objects. But the moneylender and his wife can be seen as the the difficulty in the north of merging your spiritual belief with this new capitalist wealth. The moneylender, he would be a fairly wealthy person, merchant class person, yet his wife is reading the Bible and looks over from reading her New Testament to see her husband weighing some coins. There are Christian symbols in here. For example, the clear glass um, carafe or beaker there in the lower left, which we've seen before in the Portinari altarpiece, symbolic of the Virgin. Um, there is a wine carafe in the back, also symbolic of the Eucharist. And this little convex mirror in the foreground, which reflects a person, a man reading what is probably a Bible. In the upper right, just through an open door, you see an old man conversing with a young man, symbolic of wasting your life, sort of like, I guess, sort of like watching daytime television all day, wasting your life away in idle, useless conversation. Um, these are all sort of moralistic and Christian symbols, but really we have a fairly genre depiction of a moneylender, a contemporary moneylender and his wife in their shop. So people of this time are trying to reconcile their newfound material wealth with their spiritual, which is non-materialistic, their spiritual beliefs. Meet Still Life by Peter Erikson. Um, it in one level, it's just a tour de force of showing all of this food, all of this meat, pigs, half a pig there, a pig head, the cow's head, various forms of beef, sausages, fish. So it's a meat shop, chickens. But even this is imbued with religious significance. In the center left, in the distance, is a depiction of the Virgin Mary with Joseph, the Virgin Mary on a donkey, pregnant, giving alms to the poor as other people go off towards a church or a temple. There are pretzels hanging in the rafters next to wine. This was food used during Lent. Pretzels were food that was used during Lent. In the center left are fish crossed on a plate. Um, the fish is an ancient symbol for Christians during the first 3 centuries in Rome, for example, a secret symbol for Christians, and then the forming of the cross. In the right hand, you can see a man leaning over and people carousing in a tavern. The ground is covered with like oyster shells, are symbolic of lust. Oysters, even since this time, considered to be an aphrodisiac. One of the only or